think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to the program. Ladies and gentlemen, happy Friday to everybody out there. Really appreciate it. We can't do this without you listening every single day. It really just doesn't seem to end in a lot of ways. I'm going to be perfectly honest as we continue this deep dive into let me just start here with a few of these headlines. We now at least know that there's some people in the mainstream media that are at least taking notice. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette, I got nothing from them this morning though. I don't know. Maybe they're not aware. Maybe the Arkansas Democrat Gazette is not aware. At least, let me check. I'm going to check one more time. I don't want to report something that's not true. The top headlines of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette this morning: Senate confirms former state solicitor general Lee Philip Radofsky as the U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of Arkansas. So Washington had confirmed him. Let's see, there's something about John Bolton. There's something about schools, fourth day of filing. Little Rock Task Force, state up a bit in safety at hospitals. Rollback of tariff said to be deal term. Panel balks at hiring election coordinator. That's a story out of Jefferson County. U.S. envoy hits policy in Syria. China. Oh, no. China sentences 9 drug traffickers. Yeah, so nothing. I don't see anything about the governor's son being on a trip with his father overseas. And he's got all these Chinese companies as clients that have gotten lucrative economic development deals. But the ABC affiliate at Little Rock, KATV, they have a story. Joe, go ahead and throw this up. Just want to show people that there is a headline. There's even a video you can watch if you'd like. They asked the question. This is their headline. Is the governor of Arkansas's son benefiting from his father's position? I mean, the answer is clearly yes. I mean, you can't, there's no other. I mean, to say that he's not benefiting would be it would be easily proven false. So KATV notes that he's overseas. His son is a managing partner at the Asa Hutchinson Law Group, where the governor is listed as a founder of the firm. It's not just that. Joe, did I don't think I have the LinkedIn account. If you go ahead and pull that down. I think I forgot to put this up there. I've got so much. You see how many tabs I've got up? I've got a lot to go through today. If you go to the governor's LinkedIn, go to Asa Hutchinson's LinkedIn profile if you don't mind. Because if you go to his LinkedIn profile, it says that he works for the Asa Hutchinson Law Group. So it says it right there. Not to mention, you have a little situation where it's not, if you go to the website, he's the first attorney listed there. Not that one. There's another one. That's you have to find the other one. That's the one that's just the office of the governor. But anyway, so is that the one? Yeah, owner right there. Okay, so Throw that up there. This is Asa Hutchinson's LinkedIn profile. It's the first thing up. Owner, Asa Hutchinson Law Group, PLC. It's right there. Okay? So, I mean, we can talk about his son all we want, but there's obviously another question, which is how much money, I mean, assuming he's not practicing law now as governor. And by the way, there's Bar Association rules. I've seen them. Again, I'm not an attorney, but there are some best practices, and there's one specifically about if you're an attorney and you hold public office, not to use that as an advantage. You know what I mean? Not to advertise that as an advantage. But you see it right there, owner, Asa Hutchinson Law Group. Okay. Back to the KATV article, Joe. So they note that the Asa Hutchinson Law Firm, which I'm going to affectionately refer to as the governor's law firm, represents T.Y. Garments, Rise Ever Machinery, Dragon Woodland Corporation. They note, as I have told you, that T.Y. Garments gets tax rebates. It was a deal worth $1.6 million, including a $1 million infrastructure assistance grant and a $500,000 stipend for worker training. In 2017, Rise Ever announced they're coming to Jonesboro. They got $1 million from the governor's Quick Action Closing Fund and a $100,000 grant. In April 2019, Dragon Woodland Corporation. Again, these are all clients of the governor's law firm. Dragon Woodland in Helena, West Helena. They received more than $1 million, including money for training equipment, road improvements. So then, and I didn't realize this because I had the other Twitter photo, but the Arkansas Economic Development Commission tweeted out the photo that you see there on the screen that KATV's got. But you know who else tweeted it out? Go to Asa Hutchinson III's Twitter, Joe. He tweeted this out, and this was after we had the photos from another gentleman from his LinkedIn account. We had those photos first yesterday, and then they took a better photo to where you can even more clearly see Asa III's face. Wonderful evening with the U.S. Ambassador. Now, Joe, if you'll do me a favor and scroll down and click when it says the like button, see how many, there's 8 people that have liked this photo. I'd like to see who those 8 people are, at least one of those 8 people. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Governor Hutchinson likes the photo. Okay, all right. So there's nothing to see here, right? Absolutely nothing to see here, according to the governor. He clearly doesn't have a problem with it, right? We're going to normalize this type of behavior. Normalize it. But it is very normal to them. KATV asks the question, quote, all this leads to questions about whether Asa III is benefiting financially from his father's position. There were reporters, so the governor held media availability from Japan. Now he's in Japan. He held media availability yesterday, and we have that audio for you. Joe, if you'll go to that YouTube video, I've got it queued up, and he was asked this question. See if you can hear the question about his son. This is Asa alongside the Secretary of Commerce, Mike Preston. Listen to this from yesterday.
Yes.
Could you just speak about your son's trip to China that coincided with your trip, and what was that all about? And
What was that all?
Well,
Your son's
as
trip.
Mike mentioned, as we do these trips, it's not unusual for the private sector partners to, at their own expense, go and either support the mission or to help the companies that they're interested in. For example, in this case, Ray Dillon traveled at his own expense or the expense of the company. I'm not sure which one, but he was there at the request of Sun Paper. And so he participated in part of the meetings that we had that related to Sun Paper project. Likewise, Rajesh Shakani went at his own expense to India to support our mission there. Likewise,
the question
Attorney
was,
Hutchinson, at his
Back it
own
up.
expense, came here to China to
Back it up. I
support
talked over it.
projects that are important to his own expense. Came here
Keep
to
going. Back
China.
up a little bit more.
Attorney Hutchinson, at his own expense, came here to China to support projects that are important to his client, but also very important to the state of Arkansas. He has a international immigration practice that is a little bit unique, and the visas for some of these international companies is a critical issue for them. So delighted to have that support that was paid for by the private companies and not at taxpayers' expense, and so he participated in at least one of the meetings there in China and part of the ambassador's reception.
All right, there we go. No big deal, nothing to see here. Quote, Attorney Hutchinson, at his own expense, came here to China to support projects that are important to his client, but also very important to the state of Arkansas. He has an international immigration practice that is a little bit unique, and the visas for some of these international companies is a critical issue to them. So now I understand why ASA 3, when RiseEver was coming to Jonesboro, had their big announcement in front of the Chinese flag, or the logo that looked very much like the Chinese flag. He ended the tweet with a hashtag immigration. So are we to think that the governor is getting the Chinese companies to come here, and then the Chinese companies use the governor's law firm via his son to secure the visas they need to get over here? Hashtag immigration. Is that what's going on? I mean, that's not like it's any better. This is this is exactly what everyone on the right is so upset with Hunter and Joe Biden over. This type of stuff. So I did a little bit more digging. Oh, and by the way, Brigadier General Robert S. Spaulding from the Hudson Institute, who was on the program yesterday, supporting much of what we've been talking about how these Chinese officials have great access to American politicians and their children. He mentioned that we needed to go and look at Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's speech to the Hudson Institute a couple of weeks ago. I did do that. I think it would be beneficial for us to listen to parts of that speech, especially if we couch it and compare it with some of the things that the governor said yesterday about China from Japan. So we will do that. So if you will go with me in a time machine back to Facebook, February 14th of 2015, I have this little photo for you. This is interesting. Okay, you're gonna have to follow along here, but you got the Facebook. Go ahead and throw that up there. All right, see that logo right there? That's Sue Carne. Okay, this is a Mexican meat company. Now go to the Asa Hutchinson Law Firm website. Okay. All right, now scroll up. I think it's up. Okay, you see that? Okay, so that's the Mexican meat company. Sue Carne is also a client of the governor's law firm. Okay, Sue Carne. Now back to the Facebook. Okay, now. If you can see, you can't really see there, but for the record, for the video, I can get my face out of there so that I can read this. I want them to see who posted this. Okay, this was posted back on February 14th of 2015 by a company called B2G Global Strategies. B2G was on the scene yesterday in Mexico. Now, B2G Global Strategies is a company that the governor works for. Okay, Joe, will you pull up Governor Asa Hutchinson's statement of financial interest? It's the PDF. I'm sorry, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. There it is. Okay, this is the governor's statement of financial interest right here. Okay, we're going to see right there. There's his name, William Asa Hutchinson. Okay, now scroll down, and I just want everybody to see that on his statement of financial interest, he's transparent, and he says that he works for B2G Global Strategies and makes more than $12,500. Okay, so check that mark. Go ahead. All right, so then get rid of that. So that's who B2G Global Strategies is. All right, and so that's a little connection there. Mexican meat company Sucarne is affiliated in some way with B2G Global Strategies. Maybe they use them. Well, they also use the governor's law firm. Okay, now if you'll go to their website, go to the next one. This is that's the client list. Oh, no. Actually, just wait on that. I have a progression here. I planned this out. Okay, so we see that. Okay, then we're going to go to the next Arkansas Times article. So we have this new indictment, by the way. Let's go ahead and cover that real quick. New indictment says Jeremy Hutchinson, that's the governor's nephew, paid to influence economic incentive deal. Now this is something that we can't be lost on us. There's reason to believe that Jeremy Hutchinson is singing like a canary in order to get less prison time. Okay, so there's a new indictment out, and the Arkansas Times reports it details how Hutchinson had altered justice reform, but it also gets into the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. On page 49, describes how Hutchinson was paid to intercede with the AEDC to arrange $4 million in economic incentives to lure an unnamed industrial facility to Northwest Arkansas from an existing facility in Ohio. Now, why is this all relevant? I mean, they had this whole scheme. The Jeremy Hutchinson had this whole scheme, and it had to do with what? Taxpayer incentives. So this brings Max Brantley to write this, quote, "The subject brings to mind our reporting yesterday on the presence of Asa 3 on the current trade mission to China and Japan by his father, Asa Hutchinson. Jeremy Hutchinson's uncle, Asa 3, who's reportedly paying his own way to join the Arkansas delegation, lists as clients of his law firm 3 Chinese manufacturers that have struck deals to locate plants in Arkansas, including cash payments." All right. Next, let's go to this story. Headline, again, Arkansas Times, governor optimistic about Asian trade, defends son's participation in Chinese clients. But then let's go on a time machine. Come with me on a little ride. October 31st, 2017. Governor's Asian travel tab is put at $70,000. So back in October of 2017, he went on another trip to China. And this name kind of stuck out because I'd heard it before. They list the entourage here. Governor Hutchinson, Mike Preston, Allison Williams, who's the chief of staff at the time, who donated to Democrats like Warren Sabin, which was weird. Remember when we broke that story where Allison Williams was donating to Democrats as the Republican chief of staff of the governor? Weird. But then there's this name, Yi Wong Yam. Hey, Joe, scroll down. I want people to see this name here. Yi Wong Yam. You see that? Yi Wong Yam, Special Advisor on Trade with Asia. So I was like, who is Yi Wong Yam? And why was he on that trip in 2017? Well, Yi Wong Yam is this guy. This is his website, okay? Yi Wong Yam is the senior director for this group. It's TAM PG. Is that Pacific? Let's see here. What's the name of it? Am Pacific Group. Okay? So, Am Pacific, Mr. Yam has been consulting U.S. businesses with their China operations and Chinese businesses with their investment in the United States. His extensive knowledge of both the American and Chinese business cultures and established connections are invaluable to the Am Pacific Group. We're going to wait just a second. So, scroll down, and the very first thing on his resume, can you zoom in so they can see that? Senior Trade Advisor to the Governor, Office of Governor Asa Hutchinson, State of Arkansas. Okay. All right, so is there anybody else that works? So I was like, okay, let's look up this company, Am Pacific. And we find, according to the Arkansas Secretary of State's office, that Am Pacific is a company, a limited liability company. It's in good standing, but the registering agent was Asa Hutchinson III. Okay, so Asa Hutchinson III registered this company, and then we go on the website, again, the AM Pacific website, and we see that Asa Hutchinson III works for this company as a senior legal advisor. Mr. Hutchinson currently practices law and represents clients in the area of employment, intellectual property, real estate, banking, corporate, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we have this. We have the governor's son also working for the Chinese advisor's company. Then we scroll down, and if you keep going on this particular page, this is where it gets interesting. First of all, representative clients. Nanomech is listed as one of his clients on this company, AM Pacific. And if you keep going, what's even more interesting, go back to that. It says here that he is a senior advisor to B2G Strategies, a special advisor. Yeah. So on this particular website, it says he's a special advisor, again, back to this company, B2G Global Strategies. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to put a bow on this. Go to the B2G website. Here's B2G Global Strategies. Remember, we were just talking about them. It's to the left. It's to the left. Yeah. No. It's, yeah, there it is. So this is the board of directors of B2G Global Strategies. Again, a company that the governor works for. He's disclosed it. Scroll down. Let's see. There it says Asa Hutchinson, director, has extensive experience as a former federal prosecutor. Okay? All right? Now go up to the top, and the head of this board of directors at B2G Global Strategies, a guy by the name of Tim McNally. So who is Tim McNally? Tim McNally is also one of the directors and senior management for NagaCorp. Okay, NagaCorp is a Cambodian gaming company. Do you know NagaCorp is also a client of Asa Hutchinson's law firm, Naga World Cambodia? Man, what a crazy world we live in. We got a break for 1 minute. Is this not weird? Everything's connected. Back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
All right, folks, we're up against another hard break. I apologize. We're going to go back over all of those connections in just a moment. If you're just joining us, the governor was asked a question yesterday about why his son is with him on this China trip, and he essentially brushed it off and said he's just there to support Chinese companies that use him as their lawyer, and there's nothing. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but no big deal. They were glad to have him. I mean, essentially, Asa was glad to have him, and nothing to see here. And that led KATV, at least one mainstream media outlet, to ask, is the governor's son benefiting from his father's position? The answer is an easy yes. The next question is, are you okay with that? And the other question is, this is the governor's law firm. It's not his son's.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown ninefold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Li to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Li and I met yesterday. Chairman Li indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program this morning. We don't talk a lot about international issues very often on the show, but I feel like, it's certainly something we need to pay attention to so we're not blindsided. And I've got this article here I'm looking at. It's from The Atlantic. The headline is The Coming Middle East Conflagration. Israel is bracing itself for war with Iranian proxies as Tehran escalates its provocations. I thought it'd be a good idea to introduce you to a guy by the name of Omar Kadrat. He is the former political advisor to the NATO ambassador, former Department of Defense counterterrorism prosecutor involved with the USS Cole attacks, 9/11 attacks, Gitmo. His parents actually immigrated from Afghanistan to America in the 1970s. Omar, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
I know there's a lengthy introduction, but what can you tell us about this situation in the Middle East right now? What role does America have to play in there?
Well, that's a key question. And, when it comes down to the direct question of would Russia back up Iran in the event that Israel and Iran engage in a conventional confrontation, the answer is it depends on what the U.S. is going to do and how far the U.S. is willing to go. And that's historically been the primary determinant for how world powers decide how they'll engage. But right now, Iran's global policy involves not getting sucked into a conventional military confrontation, but rather expanding its power economically, politically, maintaining control over the European energy sector. And certainly Israel has real interest. You have Hezbollah and Iran that are now very close to Israel, near the Golan Heights, all over Syria. Reportedly, Iran wants to create munitions capabilities that are resident in Syria, and of course, Iran has the most aggressive intercontinental ballistic missile program, which China is reportedly helping Iran with. And so, it's probably unlikely that Russia is going to want to get dragged into that kind of confrontation, but it's also unlikely that Iran is going to want to get subsumed in a full-blown war with Israel.
I mean, and so we have a deterrent here. So in terms of how they don't want a full-blown war, but this article talks about, fighting it via proxy. And so is that what you're saying, like Hezbollah comes in, places, basically these smaller terrorist groups that don't exactly represent a nation state?
Let's also remember that Iran can turn Hamas on and off like a light switch, and Iran can, through proxies, attack Israel, and they have.
Okay.
The question is Israel going to get drawn in and want to engage with Iran conventionally? And it's possible, but Israel itself is also not going to go into a full-blown conventional war the way the United States, for instance, went into Iraq. So, Russia's role right now, Iran is just a tool to Russia's global policy. And Iran is important because of not just countering the influence of the West, not just because Iran is willing to put boots on the ground in places where Russia is now considered by some Israelis in Hebrew called the landlord of the Middle East, but also with energy. They're aligned. They also are engaged in influencing the outcome in Venezuela, and both Iran and Russia trying to have a satellite state in the Western Hemisphere from which they can project power into our hemisphere, and in the case of a war in the future, that could be a very important geopolitical position that they have in the Western Hemisphere. But no, Russia is not interested in getting sucked into a war because Iran found itself in a limited confrontation with Israel.
What's the relationship between the United States and Israel like, in your opinion, right now?
I think it's always going to be strong, no matter what the debate is at home. Look, Israelis are saying, you could ask Israelis, and you could look at the reporting there across the demographics. Israelis feel that this administration has been the strongest pro-Israel administration in their memory. So the relationship, I think from the perspective of Israelis, when you try to take a look at what they're saying from their shoes, is they feel that it couldn't be stronger. And so the U.S. is going to back up our most important ally in the Middle East, Israel, and we have in the past, and we're going to continue to. Iran knows that. And so Iran is not going to, they know if they end up in a conventional warfare situation, they will lose badly and they will lose quickly. And so what they do is they engage in proxy warfare. They create instability. They create unrest politically. And they do it all over the place. They do it in Yemen, to the south of Saudi Arabia. They're stoking instability to the east of Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. They have Hezbollah in Lebanon. They have killed, Iran has killed countless Americans in Iraq during our war there. What they want is satellite states that they can control all over the place while remaining outside the jaws of the United States.
We're talking with Omar Kadrat, again, former political advisor to the NATO ambassador. The president, I mean, and listen, I think it's been very popular on my program when we have reported about the president's policy, trying to make good on this promise to end what has been perceived as kind of endless wars and that sort of thing. I do know we still have now troops in the Syrian oil fields, and so I wonder if you have an opinion on that. Specifically, I saw where, and again, we don't talk about international issues that often, Omar, but specifically, I did see where Bashar al-Assad said that President Trump was one of the greatest American presidents, just because he's more honest with the intentions and doesn't try to take the moral high ground in terms of saying, yeah, we want the oil. That's why we're here. Did you see that? Did you read those reports?
I did. Bashar al-Assad is a war criminal and a mass murderer and a professional propagandist. So we should not really try to be influenced or listen to what he's trying to say. But our interests in Syria fundamentally have to start with the question: what should our involvement be, and why? So, what is the vital U.S. national security interest in Syria? And I think for now that's ensuring that our gains against ISIS remain irreversible, keeping our boots on the neck of ISIS and making sure that they cannot regenerate. So I think what the American people have to think about is there is a difference in my mind, from my perspective, between ending endless wars from bring the troops home. Those are two different things. We have troops in over 100 countries around the world. No one's talking about bringing the troops home from the European command area of responsibility or Japan, where in places like that we're ready to fight. But then also no one's talking about bringing the troops home from places in Africa where we're not just ready to fight and enabling partners, but sometimes we actually end up in some confrontation. And so I think the American people need to ask themselves and try to work out in their own minds, what do you want from your president? And is it acceptable for us to have a light special operations force footprint that are not engaged in war? We won militarily against ISIS, and while our special operations forces are going to end up in some confrontations, the question is, can we understand that there's not just a black and white two-category system of war, or we have no presence whatsoever. Our special operations forces manage conditions, and I think that it should be acceptable to the American people that we have a light footprint of special operations forces around the world who are managing conditions as appropriate and not necessarily engaged in a war.
And I think and again, I'm not a foreign policy guy, but I mean, I like the idea of, hey, if you're a threat to us, we'll bomb you back to the Stone Age and fly home. I mean, that tends to be reasonable to me. I mean, as well as, like you said, limited boots on the ground where it's appropriate, right?
Yeah, and all we have to do is go back and look at what the Obama administration's posture was. And so President Obama was fully on board with an air campaign. And that alone just didn't do it. This was recent history, and we all observed that President Obama's posture towards Syria politically and militarily was a failure, and it's sort of created this chaotic situation that we're now in today. So you got to have some wherewithal on the ground in some places. It doesn't mean that we have to be in a war everywhere, but again, I think that there's a difference between ending endless wars from bring the troops home, and I think 1,000 special forces in Syria, or whatever number that the commanders and military leaders assess as appropriate in terms of a personnel commitment to manage conditions, not be in a war. I think the American people should think about accepting that. And the fact is that President Trump has American troops still in Syria, and so I think we're going to protect our interests there while at the same time not being involved in any sort of civil strife, civil war. We're going to protect our own interests.
Did you think that what happened? I mean, I remember a couple weeks ago. I know we're running out of time, but we had the situation between Turkey and Syria and all of that, and then there was the vice president went over, negotiated the ceasefire, and then you had the situation where, well, I think right before that you had ABC News airing a war footage from Syria, and it ended up being from a Kentucky gun range. And I thought, it's kind of felt like an agenda to me. But how did you think that whole Turkey and Syria situation shook out?
Well, thankfully, our Secretary of State and Vice President were able to get there and bring about a situation that we hope is going to be lasting. At the end of the day, we want less chaos in Syria instead of more chaos. ISIS and terrorist organizations thrive in contexts of chaos. So far, what we see is the United States, I think, has been taking the right steps. We don't want to be bogged down in a conflict that clearly is going to go on for a long time without, we really need to just understand what are we trying to get out of this situation for the American people. And I think that our leaders understand that that's protecting U.S. national security, the American people, and I think that this president is going to commit whatever level of resources and mode of resources that's going to achieve that.
Omar Kadrat, we appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure meeting you. Appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, giving us your perspective on things.
Thank you very much for having me on.
All righty, folks, we're going to take a break. Back in just a moment. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
With young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops.
All right, here we go. Welcome back.
China's Christians, these are
I hate to
desperate.
introduce this or interrupt this awesome Johnny Cash music that you're hearing, but we got a lot to get to. Okay, we got a lot to get to. So, for those of you who want the information that we just covered, it's in the Facebook feed right now. Okay, we've linked it all. It's all yours. You guys feel free to share it, ask questions. Now, this is what I will say. So far, the mainstream media has written one story about this. They've done one report that aired on KATV, the ABC affiliate out of Little Rock. There may be other local stories that I'm not aware of. I mean, the Arkansas Times has done 2 stories. We've done, 3 or 4 shows. We've got an article up at Conduit News and Conduit for Action that you need to check out. It's probably the most comprehensive to tell people what the issue is, because it makes the obvious comparison that the mainstream media won't make, and that's Hunter and Joe Biden. Now, they're going to. This is going to get picked up, in my opinion, going to be a national story to give Joe and Hunter Biden cover. But the governor's son's on a trip with him. The governor has the governor's law firm has all these Chinese clients. The Chinese clients are getting these sweet economic development deals. They're coming here to Arkansas, and they're using the governor's law firm. It's not just the Chinese businesses. iStation, the educational company, gets a $3.7 million contract. They also use the governor's law firm and are listed as a corporate sponsor, not to mention Walmart and others. We mentioned, we made the connection just a second ago between the Mexican meat company, Sue Carne, and B2G Strategies, which is a company that Asa works for. He lists it on his financial disclosure, so there's nothing wrong with that. But then we kind of started to connect some more dots, and the head of B2G Global Strategies, which is a security firm, is also on the board of directors of this Cambodian gaming company, Naga Corp. Naga Corp, the Cambodian gaming company, is listed on the governor's law firm's website as a corporate client. So you kind of see how all of this is odd and raises a lot of questions. So far, the mainstream media has asked one question, and if you go back and listen to it, it's kind of like, can you explain that? Can you explain why your son is on this trip, rather than answer specific questions about the governor's law firm serving Chinese clients, which have been given taxpayer monies? Not one question about this, which is the main issue. No mention of iStation. No mention of the $3.7 million contract. None of that's been brought to the light in the mainstream yet, but you're getting it first here on Conduit News. Here's the governor yesterday in a press conference from Japan being asked about why his son is on this trip. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes.
You just speak about your son's trip to China that coincided with your trip, and what was that all about?
Stop. What a terrible question. Can you talk about your son's trip to China that coincided with your trip? It's the same trip. It's the same trip. I don't care if he paid his own way or not. It's the same trip. He's at the same ambassador events. He's at TY Garments, which is his client, right? And it's technically Ace's client because Ace's name is still on the law firm. Ace is still listed at LinkedIn. Anyway, keep going. Let's hear what the governor has to say about his son's trip coincides. See, what a weak question. And then you just give him the floor instead of being like, hey, is your son benefiting from, are you using your position as governor and is your son benefiting from it? Anyway, that's the question. Or just massive legal graft at the least. Continue.
Well, as Mike mentioned, as we do these trips, it's not unusual for the private sector partners to, at their own expense, go and either support the mission or to help the companies that they're interested in. For example, in this case, Ray Dillon traveled at his own expense or the expense of the company. I'm not sure which one, but he was there at the request of Sun Paper. And so he participated in part of the meetings that we had that related to Sun Paper project. Likewise, Rajesh Shakani went at his own expense to India to support our mission there. Likewise, Attorney Hutchinson, at his own expense, came here to China to support projects that are important to his client, but also very important to the state of Arkansas. He has a international immigration practice that is a little bit unique, and the visas for some of these international companies is a critical issue for them. So delighted to have
that. Now, listen, did he just basically claim that his son was doing good work for the state of Arkansas? He got real close to that line. Didn't quite say that, but he's doing important work for the state in a way because his law firm, which is the governor's law firm, is getting the visas for these people. Just brush it off like it's totally normal. How in the world did the governor not think this would be an issue? I know the press is kind of got the political equivalent of Stockholm syndrome. The press is gonna have to report on this. I don't see how they can't at this point. I mean, you've got the KATV story, you got the Arkansas Times. This is not a Republican and Democrat thing here. And does anybody care about this? I have legislators who've contacted me. They are concerned. We'll see what happens if any of them go public. But this is huge. And I know the governor's office. I've heard the governor's office. They're trying to get their story straight about what they're going to say. How could this have happened, though? I mean, you talk about the arrogance. Just the arrogance. You think that you're just absolutely Teflon or something. And in the wake of a Hunter and Joe Biden, Asa 3, that has a checkered past anyway, is just going to show up on a trip. And folks, if it wasn't for Conduit News, nobody would even be talking about this right now. I don't think. It was one random photo that Asa 3 posted on LinkedIn with him and TY Garments, and then it was like, wait a second, TY Garments is a client of yours on the governor's website, and it's all public domain. That's the thing. None of this is like secret, or there's no secret emails or this is all just out there on websites. You just kind of connect the dots, and you see that there is just this circular situation, if you will. We got one more hour coming your way next.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. You know, I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. You know, we need people who, in the presidency, that understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a tax
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Can't do the show without you. We get hour number 2. Telephone number 870-275-9799 if you would like to contribute to the conversation today. All right, so I promised you that we would listen to a little bit of this. I'm going to contrast this. For those of you who don't know, we have one mainstream story, one mainstream media story, KATV. We reported on this last hour. Is the governor of Arkansas's son benefiting from his father's position? And they highlight the economic development deals between your taxpayer dollars going to these communist Chinese entities, TY Garments, Rise Ever Machinery, and Dragon Woodland Corporation. How all three of those Chinese entities are clients of the governor's law firm that still lists at the top Asa Hutchinson's name and then Asa 3. So we got a quote from the governor yesterday in a press conference he was streaming from Japan. Quote, Attorney Hutchinson at his own expense came here to China to support projects that are important to his client, but also very important to the state of Arkansas. He has an international immigration practice that is a little bit unique, and the visas for some of these international companies is a critical issue for them. Is he been? Now, notice the question wasn't. They didn't ask the governor if his son is benefiting from his position. They asked him to explain why Asa 3 was on the trip. That is just vastly embarrassing. Will the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette write a story on this? I mean, we've done a lot of work. Take it. Take it. I don't expect, at the very least, if they said anything, they'd be like, a local radio program. That's what they'll say. But you know what? If this is honestly about patriotism at this point, I mean, and it really is. When we look at needing to stand up to the communist Chinese. Now, it's also domestic corruption as well, or potential corruption, because you do have that Dallas firm that got $3.7 million education contract and is also a client of the governor's law firm. Hey, I wonder which came first. Did iStation, this education company that got the $3.7 million contract from the Arkansas Department of Education, did iStation start to pay the governor's law firm before or after they got the $3.7 million contract? It's just an honest question. I'd like to know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Speaking, though, of standing up to the communists, here is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo a few weeks ago. He was speaking at the Hudson Institute, and it sounded a little something like this.
Think long about history. Half a century ago, your founder charged your institution to think about the future in unconventional ways. President Trump, when he selected me to be the director of the CIA, was certainly thinking about something unconventional. Who would have predicted that this kid from Southern California would have this amazing privilege? He also knew, Herman knew, that in the interest of furthering and protecting this great and noble experience that we call the United States of America, that there was no higher mission than to getting that right. That's why I thought I'd focus in the few minutes today before I take some questions. I thought I'd focus on something that is central to what the Trump administration is working on, that is different from previous administrations. That's not political. We have taken on the challenge from the People's Republic of China in a way that the time is calling for. Look, we have a long cherished tradition of friendship with the Chinese people. We continue to do so today. We have a Chinese American community here in America that we love and treasure. I've known them through business and personal ties. I've known many of them. But I must say that the communist government in China today is not the same as the people of China. They're reaching for and using methods that have created challenges for the United States and for the world. And we collectively, all of us, need to confront these challenges from the PRC head on and along each of the many facets. There are many opportunities to be sure, but it is no longer realistic to ignore the fundamental differences between our two systems and the impact that those two systems have, the differences in those systems have on American national security. This is a departure for sure, might be viewed as unconventional. It's not what you've heard from leaders for the last 2 decades plus. Frankly, we've been slow to see the risk of China, the risk that it poses to American national security, because we wanted friendship with the People's Republic from the very start, and because we, as Americans, always continue to hope for that. But frankly, in our efforts to achieve this goal, we accommodated and encouraged China's rise for decades, even when that rise was at the expense of American values, Western democracy and security, and good common sense.
Stop. I want to juxtapose what you just heard Secretary of State Mike Pompeo say and what the governor said yesterday from Japan about China, specifically Chinadelphia and Sun Paper. Listen.
Projects moving again. What did you learn?
Well, the encouraging thing that I learned in regard to the projects is that despite the international disputes surrounding trade, the government of China is still forward-leaning in terms of encouraging their businesses to do investments. And so there's not any obstacle in terms of the government as it relates to the Sun Paper investment. And that was very encouraging to me. And it really, even though they have a totally different political philosophy here in China, we're in Japan now, but in China, they still recognize the independent decisions within certain frameworks of business. And so Sun Paper has a couple of obstacles in order to utilize the air permit that's been granted. And they have to make sure that all the financing is in place. They got to make sure that the trade negotiations are settled in a favorable way. For example, if you build a paper mill in the United States and you ship goods back to China, you're going to be subject to a retaliatory tariff. And so that was not part of the original business plan.
You can clearly see there is an ignorance, a willful ignorance. Ignore what the Secretary of State said. Ignore Congressman Rick Crawford on the Intelligence Committee that says don't do business with China. Don't bring the companies here. It's a Trojan horse. You can't trust the Chinese. The governor ignores all of that to pursue deals with the Chinese. And we've been asking why for a very, very long time. Why would ASA be doing this? And I think the answer, the obvious answer that I would welcome the governor to argue with, is because his law firm is taking money from the same Chinese companies that he's trying to bring here with your taxpayer dollars. That's the only explanation as far as I'm concerned, unless you want to argue it, and please argue it. Because, make me feel better about this. Maybe there's other facts that we don't know. Back to Mike Pompeo at the Hudson Institute.
We downgraded our relationship with our longtime friend Taiwan on the condition that the Taiwan question would be resolved peacefully to normalize relations with Beijing. We all too often shied away from talking directly about the human rights issues there and American values when they came into conflict. And we downplayed ideological differences even after Tiananmen Square massacre and other significant human rights abuses. We encouraged China's membership in the World Trade Organization and other international organizations, premised on their commitment to adopt market reforms and abide by the rules of those organizations. And all too often, China never followed through. We hesitated and did far less than we should have when China threatened its neighbors like Vietnam and like the Philippines, and when they claimed the entire South China Sea. Frankly, we did an awful lot that accommodated China's rise in the hope that communist China would become more free, more market-driven, and ultimately, hopefully, more democratic. And we did this for a long time. There's another reason we adopted these policies. We didn't realize how China was evolving. Frankly, the American people didn't get the full story. I've talked to so many business leaders. U.S. companies that invested heavily in China were forced to comply with China's terms. This includes just about any topic that the Chinese Communist Party deemed controversial. Beijing's intransigence creates a permanent class of China lobbyists in the United States. Their primary job is to sell access to Chinese leaders and connect business partners. And frankly, whenever there was a dispute or tension in a relationship, many of our scholars blamed the United States for misrepresenting the nature of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Beijing controlled and limited access to our diplomats, journalists, and academics when they were traveling to mainland China. They still do that today. If you saw the difference in how Chinese diplomats are treated and how American diplomats and the access they have, you too would find the absence of reciprocity deeply inconsistent with American values. And China's state-run media and government spokespeople filled the gaps, routinely maligning American intentions and policy objectives. They still do that today. They distorted how Americans view the People's Republic and how they review General Secretary Xi. These bad outcomes were all too predictable. They were predictable byproducts of dealing with a secretive regime that doesn't respect fairness, the rule of law, and reciprocity. Today, we're finally realizing the degree to which the Chinese Communist Party is truly hostile to the United States and our values, and its worst deeds and words and how they impact us. And we're able to do that because of the leadership of President Trump. The president sounded this issue, this alarm, since his very first day. I remember one speech he gave back in Pennsylvania when he called China's WTO membership the greatest job theft in history. A lot of people laughed. I don't think so many of them are laughing now that they can see the reality. It's the case that now we know China weakens America's manufacturing base by conducting massive intellectual property theft. I had a group of Fortune 500 CEOs in my office last week. The stories are staggering. Now we know too that China threatens American freedoms by demanding our companies self-censor to maintain access to that Chinese market. We've all seen the stories recently with the NBA. The truth is Beijing ought to be free to run its own PR campaign. They're a sovereign nation. But if we disagree, our companies ought to be permitted to have that disagreement.
Lost in all this, like going to China after the NBA
Silencing
thing.
dissent simply is not acceptable. And now we know that China threatens America's national security by developing asymmetric weapons that threaten our strategic assets too. The list goes on. And these aren't just our problems. They're problems for all nations that share our values.
Mm-hmm.
When we see Beijing use coercion as a preferred tool of statecraft, it's not good for those of us who believe in democracy and sovereignty as the fundamental norms that ought to dominate world commerce and the way nations interact. These ideas, they threaten the free and open international order by making extrajudicial, territorial, and maritime claims in places like the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. We know too that Beijing entwines its neighbors and others in its state-led economic model, often closing deals with bribes, often trapping many in debilitating debt levels, threatening their own sovereignty.
Closing deals with bribes?
And now we know too, and we can see, China's regime trampling the most basic human rights of its own citizens, the great and noble Chinese people. We've seen this in Hong Kong, where they need to live up to their promises and commitments, and we've seen it in the gross human rights violation of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. We know too that the Chinese Communist Party is offering its people in the world an entirely different model of governance. It's one in which a Leninist party rules and everyone must think and act according to the will of the communist elites.
We're doing business in Arkansas with
not a future that I want.
With Leninists.
I think it's not a future that anyone in this room wants. It's not a future that other democracies want. And it's not a future that the people of China, the freedom-loving people of China everywhere, don't want this model. President Trump's national security strategy lays this out. It recognizes China as a strategic competitor. That means there's challenges and there's real opportunities, and we hope that we can engage with them in ways that are constructive. But it's reality, it's the truth. It's also the case that we didn't choose some of these issues. China forced them upon us. In the coming months, I'm going to give a series of sets of remarks. I'm going to talk about each of these in some more detail. I'll talk about the competing ideologies and values and the impact that has on America and the world. The Chinese Communist Party is a Marxist-Leninist party focused on a struggle and international domination. We need only listen to the words of their leaders. I'll discuss too how they interfere with the things we take most for granted here in the United States. The party's intelligence agencies, the United Front work, and its propaganda outlets have embarked on a global campaign to change public opinion in favor of Beijing.
Stop.
We want to preserve.
Obviously, the governor is kind of like a de facto PR guy for the Chinese. I mean, to listen to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and then to listen to Governor Asa Hutchinson when he did get asked this question, why is your son with you on this trip to China? And this is what he said.
It's late in the day for you. Yes.
Could you just speak about your son's trip to China that coincided with your trip, and what was that all about? And
coincided with your trip.
Well, as Mike mentioned, as we do these trips, it's not unusual for the private sector partners to, at their own expense, go and either support the mission or to help the companies that they're interested in. For example, in this case, Ray Dillon traveled at his own expense or the expense of the company. I'm not sure which one, but he was there at the request of Sun Paper. And so he participated in part of the meetings that we had that related to Sun Paper project. Likewise, Rajesh Shakani went at his own expense to India to support our mission there. Likewise, Attorney Hutchinson, at his own expense, came here to China to support projects that are important to his client, but also very important to the state of Arkansas. He has a international immigration practice that is a little bit unique, and the visas for some of these international companies is a critical issue for them. So delighted to have that support that was paid for by the private companies and not at taxpayers' expense.
So he's doing important work. The work that ASA 3 is doing is Attorney Hutchinson is important work for the state of Arkansas. It's important because he's got a visa. He's doing business with the companies that his dad gave taxpayer money. We're going to break for a minute here and come back. I'm going to rehash what I talked about at the beginning of the show. We started doing a little investigating, and what we found is just interesting in terms of how close-knit everything is. If you start to looking, some of these international firms are affiliated with each other, and I guess you would expect that, but This needs, I guess my point is all this needs to be investigated, because the facts of what we know, what is just out there on the website, interfaces, public domain, it's not just a question of whether or not is the governor's son benefiting from, of course he is. That's the easy, we know that. We know the governor's son is benefiting financially from his position. We know that. The real question is, this is the governor's law firm. It's still listed on his LinkedIn account that he is the owner of the Hutchinson Law Group. He's advertised in their write-ups as, oh well, the founder's the governor of Arkansas. Wink, wink. I mean, you read between the lines there. And the real question is, it's the governor's law firm. And the governor's law firm's clients are the same companies that get these sweet economic development deals to move to Arkansas. $1 million here and $1 million there. How much of that's being tithed back to the law firm? Honest question. Also, you have the other client in Dallas that got almost $4 million in taxpayer funds through the Department of Education and their client of the governor's law firm. Back in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown 9-fold. It's become the second largest economy in the world.
All right. I'm so sorry. I talked too long. We've got a minute and a half. I'm going to go and... Yeah, there we go. My mic wasn't on. One of the governor's clients on his law firm is a corporation called Naga Corp. It's a Cambodian gaming company, okay? I'm just going to work in reverse here. I only got about a minute left. So Naga Corp lists on their website the director and senior management, the chairman, a guy by the name of Tim McNally, okay? Tim McNally is also the head of a group called B2G Strategies, B2G Global Strategies. He's the chairman of the board. Now, B2G Strategies is the same company that Asa Hutchinson is the director of, and he lists that on his financial disclosure form. Okay, that he makes more than $12,500 a year at least working for B2G Strategies. So that's kind of interesting there. You see that connection? All right. And now B2G Strategies also is at least loosely affiliated with, I found this Facebook post of Sue Carne, a Mexican meat company. Okay. Sue Carne, B2G Strategies, posted that they were there yesterday. This is back in 2015, opening their meat production facility. Sue Carney is a client of the governor's website or law firm.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Rui, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Lee to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong province. I met with Chairman Lee. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program this morning. Now, we've talked a little bit about this already, but we know that next week is the National Apprenticeship Week, November 11th through the 17th. And there's going to be an employer forum where employers can get some help maybe growing talent through this thing called Apprenticeship Tuesday, November 12th at the First National Bank Arena in Jonesboro from 8:30 to 12. The special guest there, again, Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin will be there. I wanted to bring in the director for the Office of Skills Development. His name is Cody Waits. Cody, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Paul. Thanks for having me.
So just tell us a little bit about what you hope to accomplish with this event.
Sure. So, the Office of Skills Development, in partnership with the Division of Workforce Services, both part of the newly formed and created Department of Commerce as of transformation of government on July 1, have really been partnering together in recent months to expand apprenticeships over the course of the next not only 12 months, but moving into the future. We've done a couple of these events previously in Northwest Arkansas as well as Little Rock. We've had great success there in getting
All right, folks.
companies.
We want to welcome back to the program. We really appreciate it. We're going to welcome back with us. We've got Congressman Rick Crawford on the line. Rick, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Man, so first of all, what can you tell us about what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now? I know it's obviously tough with the Democrats and their zaniness.
It is. So what we have going on here is really basically a demonstration of their lack of faith in their ability to win elections, their lack of faith in their own candidate, and how they're trying to impact the 2020 election. What they're trying to make this about is, nullifying the 2016 election, basically by weakening the president and softening him up. They say that it's about 2016, but what this is really about is targeting 2020, and they know they can't beat him, so let's just do it this way, ignoring the people's voice, ignoring the millions of people who voted to elect this president, and just take this into their own hands and say, well, we're smarter than the American people, we'll solve this on our own.
Yeah, and it's right now, I think the president would win easily. He would win re-election, and some of them have admitted it. We have to impeach him or he'll win. And so
that's a fact. Yeah.
So I mean,
well,
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, the thing about it is, you've got now Bloomberg throwing his hat in the ring because he knows that nobody in the Democrat field can beat him, and so, well, heck, I've got the resources, I got the money. Maybe I can buy this thing myself, like he buys everything else. He played aggressively in elections across the country. Was a huge investor in Democrat candidates, and that was a critical part of them regaining the majority in the House. But now he's aligning himself with socialists. And the fact of the matter is, and you know this, and folks here at home that know this, I have been very deferential and respectful of people's political identity with regard to the cultural nature of their political identity. Cultural Democrats. Not political Democrats, but cultural Democrats. Here in the South, we grew up to be Democrats. Our parents, in many cases, were Democrats. Our grandparents, most assuredly, were Democrats. And so trying to respect, the cultural identity of the South. But look, those days are over. They're just over. The Democrat Party has officially endorsed socialism. And some have gone so far as to be, communists. I don't know what else you call somebody like Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts. AOC is an unabashed socialist. The other members of the squad are socialists. Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist.
Yeah.
Most of them espouse socialist policies. So what else can you call them? Mm-hmm. And so I think, all due deference to our folks here at home, I think we have to now come to grips with the fact that the die is cast here, and there's not a whole lot going back. There's not anybody showing any sign of saying, look, I'd like to reclaim, the traditional Democrat platform. There's nobody doing that. Nobody.
Yeah. I'm going to make this leap here. I bet because I know you've been critical, on Talk Business and Politics. Also on this show, we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I know you've been critical about China and the idea of doing deals with them here. Like you said, socialism is now something that the Democrat Party is promoting. Many people have called socialism microwave communism. We have China, which is very communist. They are trying to supplant the United States. They have a 100-year plan to do so. And, I'd like to give you another opportunity to tell us. You've said on this program before, doing these economic development deals with China is a Trojan horse. Can you address that again?
Yeah, so what's going on, and the more I travel globally, the more I see it, they engage in practices that is called a debt trap, what they do is they go into third world countries and they will loan them money, and they're like loan sharks, knowing that they don't have the capacity to repay, but they do this for political reasons. And then the next thing you know, that particular country can't meet their financial obligations, and then lo and behold, China comes in and forecloses and essentially owns a part of that country. And this is something that's taken place all over the world. They're exploiting developing nations all over the globe, and particularly in places on the African continent as well as in South America. Now, why this is troubling, we're seeing this ramp up in our hemisphere. We're seeing it all over South America, all over Central America, and quite frankly, we're seeing it in the United States. Now, they have to operate a little differently in the United States because we are a developed nation. We are the largest economy, the most advanced economy, and so they have to do things a little bit differently here. They have to play things a little closer. They've got a different regulatory regime to have to follow. They have a very well-developed political system to navigate, and so they're not as in-your-face about it, but believe me, they're here aggressively. They're here to undermine our economy. They're here to exploit everything they can, steal everything they can, and weaponize what they steal against us. They weaponize foreign direct investment from the United States in their economy and turn it against us politically, economically, and even literally in terms of military hardware and technology, because they do have the stated goal of world dominance. That was a 100-year goal that was espoused 70 years ago in the revolution. That's been a key part of their strategy, and they are long-term thinkers. They're dynastic in nature. They're not worried about politics, and this is their goal. And so when we see Chinese investment in the United States, it's not investing in the United States. It's investing in themselves and their ability to supplant the United States as the preeminent economic power in the world, and ultimately the preeminent military power in the world. Now, this is out there for everybody to see. You don't need to take my word for it. This is being reported all over the news, and all you have to do is just take a look and see around you what's going on. And I travel extensively around the globe as a member of the Intelligence Committee. Just got back from one trip, and that's always one of the primary, if not the primary, topics of conversation wherever I go.
Peter, we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I really appreciate your candor on all of this, and I want to reemphasize you are a member of the Intelligence Committee. And so you are privy to information that you can't share totally, but you have shared your concerns about China. Peter Schweitzer has this book called Secret Empires, and it details, and we were just listening to Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State. He gave a speech at the Hudson Institute, just talking about the access that the Chinese lobby has here in America versus the access, let's say, if an American goes to China, how, they are not, if a lobbyist were to go to China, they're very restricted in how they can approach the political leaders over here. That's not the case. But in that book, Secret Empires, it talked about this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scenario that's in the news, and how the kids of these politicians, there's nothing stopping them from financially benefiting legally. It may be unethical, but it's something that's going on. Can you address that a little bit?
Well, what you find are politicians that are out there that are willing to thread the needle with regard to legal and ethical. And, in my case, I mean, the transparency that is statutory at the federal level for members of Congress, it's not a matter of if you'll get caught if you're doing things that are unethical or illegal. It's when. You will get caught, because the disclosure rules and all the rules governing being a member of Congress and the transparency that accompanies that, it would be hard to overcome in 2019. Now, the reason those rules exist is because people have exploited them, and people have taken advantage for years. That's been a part of our system, and it's been addressed. It's continually addressed in a variety of ways, and so it's very, very difficult for someone to skirt these rules. So if you're doing it deliberately. And so what you're finding out is, are you willing to take an ethical hit? No, I didn't break the law, but it was unethical, and I'm not so much concerned about ethics as I am lining my pockets. As long as I'm technically legal, I'm less concerned about whether or not it passes muster from an ethical standpoint if I can benefit from it personally. Well, that's intolerable. And there are members of Congress who have done it, been caught. Some of them are in jail right now. Some of them are currently in legal trouble and under indictment. I don't care what party you belong to. It's wrong, shouldn't be tolerated. And so if that's going on, then look, be ready, because eventually you're going to be found out, and there's going to be some outrage, and people are going to complain about it, and you're going to have to give an account for it.
We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. He's on the line, and he is always a great interview. It's always great to talk to you, sir. I really appreciate it. And just keep us posted, and keep fighting the good fight up there, okay?
Roger that. Appreciate it.
All righty. Congressman Rick Crawford, everybody. We'll make a YouTube video of this. We are going to reset here, and we're going to be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
By any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea, Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive.
All right, so now this is what I got to know. This is the logical question. If you have a situation where the governor's law firm has all these clients that are also Chinese companies getting economic development deals, are there any other state politicians that have that do business with the Chinese and have like Chinese contracts? That's going to be my next question, because if you look at this, okay, you look at that, this it'd be very easy to kick somebody a contract, somebody that's, you know, let's say you do have a private business back home, you're not just a full-time legislator, and you got a business back home, and then here's some Chinese money. And the reason why we have to think this way is because of what the Chinese do to all these other countries. The Chinese in every other country, before they go in, they grease the skids, right? Cambodia, or Mozambique, these third world countries, right? So that's just what happens. And in a world where we've got, you know, John Woods, Jake Files, Mike and Neil, Rusty Cranford, who had tried to have a guy killed because he was going to testify against him, Jeremy Hutchinson, Tom and Bontia Goss, oh man, Henry Hank Williams, former state representative Eddie Cooper, all these people. I mean, in a world where I just listed all those on top of my head, I'm sure I left some people out. They're in jail. We have a very corrupt state where politicians have no problem carving out a financial niche for themselves, using their office to do it. That's why it's no surprise that the governor's law firm has Chinese companies using his son as their attorney, and they're the same companies that have been given taxpayer money and are promising to come here and create jobs sometime in the next 50, 100 years. So my next question would be: Are there any state senators, are there any state reps who've got companies that are also taking Chinese money or have Chinese contracts? I'm sure it may all look very legitimate on paper, but it's an honest question. Because all I hear from the state legislature of the General Assembly is silence, for the most part. I hear silence. You remember when Asa Hutchinson gave $900,000 so that they could build a dojo in North Little Rock, Taekwondo? You know?
That was the beginning of the China thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Doesn't the Taekwondo, in light of China, is Taekwondo, where is that even from? Is it from Taiwan? I don't know. I'm totally ignorant on that. I don't know what country of origin that is. But it's definitely Eastern, right? I mean, we're definitely talking about Eastern fighting styles. I know that much. So they get to build a dojo in North Little Rock because they get $900,000 from the governor. And then they move the event out of state that they have every year. The national headquarters, then they move it out of state. We don't even get the revenue from it. And I want you to keep in mind also that this is all done in the name of economic development. And little did we know, economic development means Asa Hutchinson's law firm getting money. That's what it means, and they've got to find a way to justify it. How do they justify it? Because it is unethical. It's totally unethical. It may technically be legal, but it's totally unethical. They must justify it like, well, we're providing all these commoners with an average income of $40,000 here in Arkansas because we're a poor state. We're providing all these commoners with jobs at factories run by the Chinese communists. So we're not going to deprive ourselves of a little off the top. We've got to make a living, too. We're the elite. What a bunch of baloney this is. What a bunch of baloney. Real quick, I'm going to run through this. KATV is the only mainstream outlet that I know that's reported on this. They're asking, does the governor's son benefit from his father being governor? They asked it. We covered the audio. Go back and check it out. Yesterday we had Asa Hutchinson III posting an even clearer photo of him with his dad, with the ambassador over in China. Then we have this old post from B2G Global Strategies, a company that lists Asa Hutchinson on the board. Back in 2014 or 15, this Mexican meat processing company called Su Carne posted something or was in a photo posted by B2G Global Strategies. So I started doing a little research, figuring this out, and then I eventually come to this guy who is Asa's advisor. Okay, his name is Yi Wong Yam. Yi Wong Yam, if you go to his website, which is the AM Pacific Company, his first listed accomplishment on his website, Yi Wong Yam, is Senior Trade Advisor to the Governor of Office of Governor Asa Hutchinson, State of Arkansas. So then if you go look up this company, AM Pacific, you find that Asa Hutchinson III is the registering agent on the Secretary of State's side. Next up, you find that Asa Hutchinson III is listed on the AM Pacific Company's website as the Senior Legal Advisor. If you scroll down, you find that not only does it say that he represents Nanomech, which is this defunct company out of Springdale that's really strange, it also says that he is, with B2G Strategies, is a, quote, special advisor to B2G Global Strategies, Asa III. Again, the same company that his dad works for. Now, that's a private company. It's no big deal that your father works for B2G Strategies as well as your son. But then you start to look at the fact that B2G Strategies head, not Asa, Asa's a director on that company, B2G Strategies head is a guy by the name of Tim McNally. Tim McNally is also the chairman of Naga Corp, which is the Cambodian gaming company. Naga Corp is also listed on the governor's law firm's website as a corporate client. And it's just to let you guys know, again, nothing necessarily illegal. We're just connecting the dots. What we still want to know is, why does iStation, one of the governor's law firm, one of the governor's clients or the law firm's clients, why did that company also get awarded an almost $4 million contract with the Department of Education? Why did that happen? I'm going to leave you this week. We've got a lot to think about this weekend, don't we? With the quotes from George Washington Plunkett. Quote, everybody's talking these days about Tammany men growing rich on graft, but nobody thinks of drawing the distinction between honest graft and dishonest graft. There's all the difference in the world between the two. I've not gone in for dishonest graft, blackmailing, gamblers, saloon keepers, disorderly people, and neither has any of the men who've made big fortunes in politics. There's an honest graft, and I'm an example of how it works. I might sum up the whole thing by saying I seen my opportunities and I took them. Just let me explain. My party's in power in the city, and it's going to undertake a lot of public improvements. I'm tipped off, say, that they're going to lay out a new park at a certain place. I see my opportunity and I take it. I go to that place, I buy up all the land I can in the neighborhood, then the board of this or that makes the plan public, and there's a rush to get my land which nobody cared particular for before. Dishonest graft versus honest graft. Honest graft is technically legal, and the victim of honest graft, Asa, is the common good. But we're creating jobs. It's economic development. I wonder if we charted the revenue of the law firm over the years. That's the real economic development.